terms of portamento, it's clear that that's part of the language for all of this repertoire at that time. And certainly what I hear on those early recordings is a mixture of the German style and the Franco-Belgian style. So I'd like to explore that mixture, but with the balance tipped towards the Franco-Belgian style. Certainly what both Allard and de Berriot say about portamento makes me think that they favoured staying on the same finger wherever possible and disguising the shift to a new finger. If that was part of the portamento, to shift to the new finger imperceptibly. And in terms of where to change bow, that's explored in terms of a desirable thing in de Berriot as being on the same bow for the whole shift. But what I think I hear on those early recordings is it's quite subtle the way they do the Franco-Belgian thing. So they don't move, I think they don't move to the new bow at the beginning of the shift. I think they do it after the shift has started. I find it quite imperceptible. So it's not. So
it's neither in the old bow or the new bow.
Sorry.
It's in.
It's
both
neither.
The old
I think what they do is they start the shift and then they move to the new bow. So it has a very Franco-Belgian flavour, but it doesn't have that swooping sound that happens when you move to the new bow at the beginning of the portamento. So that's what I think I hear.
It might be good to sort of demonstrate some of these things as we...
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If I were to do... see what I mean? So to start on the old, to move to a new bow and start the portamento at the same time, you almost hear a reiteration of the starting note. And that is totally valid, I hear that. And then there's also the one which is more disguised that I've just been describing. So I can just describe it mainly as it sounds more swoopy the earlier you move into the new bow.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then I also hear quite a lot of a little anticipatory note before the peak of a phrase and the end of a portamento. So which is very, very in the style of singing at the time. And I hear that a lot at the peaks of phrases. So that if it's a really long phrase, then the highest point of the phrase, I often hear that little anticipatory, like a grace note.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. But that, of course, means changing bow after the portamento. It's as if there has been a change, rather than it being the same syllable, it's as if there's a change of word or syllable on the arrival note.
And as you're saying, it's the peak of the phrase, because they also talk about the messa di voce being across a phrase now, no longer in a note. So I think that's also part of the bow and how the bow does that. That we, coming from previous ones, we would do the messa di voces, but this is as a result of a sostenuto effect of this as well. So then the portamento is kind of adding to that
feeling
to
of
that messa di
yes,
voce.
yeah, and like an extended hairpin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of, I don't know, that it's sort of, I noted that too also in a lot of the markings, a lot of the hairpins are really long.
Yeah.
Especially in the Farrenc.
Yeah.
So I wondered if that's also an indicator of how the bow has to
help carry the line.
Has to help carrying the notes longer as well.
So yeah, I mean that's a really good point, because I'm sure that they were already having a preoccupation with line, but within that, the prosody that de Berriot talks about is really important. So that nuancing that comes from speech ultimately.
Well, it certainly made sense when you start thinking of poetry and how would you want to influence the poetry in using this, because otherwise it becomes a bit random about where you do a shift.
Yeah.
And it definitely helps when you know the length of the phrase and you know that it's at some point into the phrase and also some point going out of the phrase as well. So at the apex, but also I think I noticed a lot of the ones are on the way. So as you're saying what you want to say, you're kind of, using it to influence what the poetry, I guess, the line, the text. You're using it to influence the text.
Yes.
But both on the way up and on the way down as well.
Yes. Yes.
Did you notice?
It's actually a kind of tension and release in itself, isn't it? That comes from the words as well as the pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's very sentimental. Like for me, it's way more sentimental. The Franco-Belgian style.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Than the German style.
Yeah. So, and I'm finding it in my preparation. I'm finding it useful to focus on those three types of portamento that Deverio highlights. So the lively one.
Yes. Yes.
And then the which can happen within a very sentimental phrase. I'm finding it's helping me to mix up the type of portamento I do, even within a very sentimental or affectionate or plaintive phrase. So
also used in quick tempos, in other words.
Sorry.
Also used within quick tempos.
Yes. Yeah.
And a quick portamento then.
A quick portamento. Yeah.
So depending on
the character. It gives it life rather than...
So just depending on the character.
Yeah, but that's also an unusual place to think, because it's not the sentimental moment, it's not the languid moment.
It's a different function. Yeah.
Energized moment in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Deverio talks about avoiding doing a portamento up to a peak and then immediately down. But you hear that all the time in the recordings.
But you hear different speeds though. That's what I noticed. They never would do the same speed up and the same speed down.
Yeah.
So that's what sort of, I think they technically get away with doing it in both directions, because it seems like it's a different portamento.
Yes.
The one that goes up to the one that goes down. Like the choice is, you're saying something different.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm finding that to think of maybe the ascent being either lively or charming, and then the descent being a bit more plaintive or the other way around.
Yeah,
just to think of a character.
Yeah.
Helps. I'm finding it's helping me know how to create the portamento, both in terms of speed and weight of bow.
Yeah.
So,
in terms of Deverio saying those things, don't we have to also keep in mind that the truth is somewhere probably in between the recordings and because he's talking to students. Yeah. He's addressing the Brussels Conservatory students, and so obviously while they're learning to do those things, that professionals probably did more.
But he also emanated, is that the word?
Yeah.
Emanated that style.
Yeah.
And it's his style
that
he's talking about.
Yeah, he developed
he developed it. So,
They're
all going to take a different example of it.
And in terms of intervals, I certainly hear it across all intervals, ascending and descending.
Okay.
They're particularly fond of, in the really earliest recordings, I hear a lot of descending seconds. So, for example, in the theme of the Farrenc, the fourth bar, I think it would be good to do one between the A and the G sharp.
I put it ready.
Yeah.
Immediately, which I hadn't.
Which I didn't do last time.
I hadn't
thought
done
of it,
before.
but actually,
I was the same. I literally heard a lot of those drop-offs on those.
Yeah.
And time, also time. But what I find is that to get the right feeling of the portamento, you have to start it earlier. Like in your brain, you have to start it earlier, and your finger has to start it earlier.
Yeah.
Because I think that's our danger, is that we start them late, and then you get this swipe effect.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to get onto the beat of the next beat, and it's like we have to pull time out of the previous note to be able to give it the space to shift.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's what they train, if that's the process of how they practiced it. I'm not sure.
I think from the recordings, it's clear that they did that. You can hear his singers certainly moving off notes very quickly.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the peaks of phrases.
No.
But
No.
But for example, the end of the first bar of the theme in the Farrenc, I think they'd move off that C pretty quickly.
Yes, but interesting. Listening to that recording of the Franck sonata, he doesn't use a single portamento for the first 6 bars almost. Like you would think that theme would give you every right to go up and down, but from what I noticed from listening once or twice, it didn't. And it struck me because I was immediately going, I can go all over the place, and then he didn't. He played really, and then just at the very end you get this one.
Yeah.
So I was also questioning whether whether the beginning doesn't have any, except for that falling second at the end. I don't know. Again, we're just taking examples of repertoire and then defining it and saying, okay, what was applied in this piece? I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of us experimenting and seeing what we think.
Yeah.
But did you? I was challenged by that as well. That it wasn't always.
It's not an automatic.
No, it's
reflex.
not at the beginning necessarily.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's one thing. We could decide not to do one between bar 1 and 2. On the first rendition, perhaps we could do one on the repeat.
You could do it differently on the repeat.
Because we're well into the journey. So that could be a concept that they had, which was that they'd use more portamento as the emotional context
Yeah.
Increased. Yeah,
do you want to talk all about the style of Franco-Belgian vibrato or what we're doing? Because that's something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go on from the next thing yet.
No, we should, because it's connected, isn't it?
Yeah, because that's all to do with it.
Looking at the treatise, it's clear. I mean, with Allard, no mention at all, and then De Berriot, who's pretty warns against it and reserving it for just the most intense moments. And then comparing that with the recordings have more, of course. But the three that I sent through I love because there is variety. And particularly in the early two, you hear moments of no vibrato, or just a really barely perceptible one.
In soft passages, generally.
In soft passages, also in loud passages.
Also in loud passages,
yeah.
okay.
So I think they mixed it up, and I think they used it. Again, this could be something that was De Berriot's particular preoccupation. I mean, he thinks it should only be used in really intense moments, but I think that it may also have been used in charming moments as well.
Article you sent through from Will Crutchfield. It's an article he wrote a long time ago for the New York Times about the difference in the early recordings and the effect of vibrato. And I don't know, I'm sure you've already looked into that, but the idea that the vibrato doesn't come through on a lot of those early recordings, and that the violinists increased the level of vibrato because it sounds better on a recording to increase it, because then with that technology, that's how it got through at this register, specifically about the violin. That the violin range does not get picked up on those early recordings, so they all then amplified their vibrato to make it
So it was
audible.
a response to the technology.
It was a response to the technology.
More than an expressive thing, perhaps. Well,
That's a question, and if we're using this technology, which does pick up everything, it's also a case of, are we hearing, that sort of round the circle thing. But it did strike me, reading that article.
I think that's a very valid point, because certainly in piano playing we know that they tended to do more so that it would register onto the wax, because piano was very difficult to record. So they did a lot more, much more of the practices like dislocation, arpeggiation, because they had to, in order to get dynamic
range.
Nuance.
Okay, because the dynamic range was so limited.
Yeah, so people did talk about that very early on. It didn't necessarily happen later.
No.
The other thing is there is that sort of what seems to be a watershed moment in about the 1880s with Mazars. Franco and him writing this thing on the constant use of vibrato, and then his students go off and do it. So things like Flesch and others, Kreisler and all of these people who did study with him, seem to have then taken that on and made it a continuous thing. I mean, albeit not still modern. It's not still modern vibrato, but so we're talking about performance in the 1850s, and I would tend to think that it was more sparingly used than the recordings.
There was also a French sound that my teacher who studied with Thibaut talked about. It was getting a different, when I studied Ravel with him, it was a different sort of sound that we explored. That was really unlike anything. And it was to do with the amplitude of the vibrato also, but also the bow speed. And it's hard to quantify it, but it's a very different tonal quality, the French school, than what we're used to from other schools. Maybe that's something we can explore too.
Yeah. I've heard from several sources that the French loved the tasto sound.
Yeah, that was more
even if that was quite a strong tasto sound. Okay. So not always reserved for the most translucent, transparent sounds, but actually exploring that colour you can get, that rich colour you can get over the fingerboard. So that's
okay.
That could be, it could be...
Yeah, partly impressionistic and all that sort of...
But bow speed as well is the really important thing to notice.
Yeah.
But a question that does come up for me when is that an impressionistic thing and later than the 1850s? I mean, it's perfectly valid to try all these things out. I mean, just a question of not sort of, I don't know, just to put it in.
Thibaut when was he from? Weren't those recordings of him playing?
Oh, they're from the 20s and 30s actually, because he died in 53 in that plane crash. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In the French Alps.
It's beautiful, but it's just a question of you know, again.
Thinking of the French language could help.
Yes.
That is, there's such a different palette of colour in the French language.
And I'm wearing French designer, thank you.
Oh, much appreciated. Inspire us. Will you wear that every day, please?
Of course.
So, the thing that I noticed most on all the early recordings, I mean, the massive difference between what we generally do nowadays, and that is that agogics are there everywhere, lengthening certain notes and really, it feels like no one ever expected to hear a bar played exactly as it is written. And they did it individually as well. You know, it wasn't like
within an ensemble.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily always. Someone could do it.
That was my little question, because a lot of this, well, not a lot of it. There are occasions where we're in unison.
Yeah.
So, are we going for the unison effect when it's there? Because they did also play.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. So I mean, I think maybe with unisons, but you can have that. You know, if a group's played together and they know that they play da ya di da di.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just like they wouldn't hear any other way.
Yes. Good example of the Farrenc.
Yeah.
So my question also is relating to the slurs. Are the slurs affecting how you choose which notes are becoming affected, or is it harmony is the only thing that gives you that reason to play around?
I think harmony is a big thing, but but there are cases where for example, the equal, slurred pairs as we call them. In those ones, I think the recordings show that there's a lot of bending of those. So there's long short kind of thing.
It's more often long short than the other way around.
Often long short.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Little slight inegale effect.
Slurred pairs that sound like sides are often long short.
So, but just lingering on notes that we enjoy a bit more.
So if you have, particularly in solos, if you're on your own, you can bring out harmonic notes that are important, by.
And also what I noticed so much more, the tempo modification happened together in the ensembles and the pieces that I heard, and they didn't make it up.
No,
it wasn't made up. It was. I mean, the time wasn't made up. It just got slow.
Yeah. There's no compensating.
There's no
very
which is
rare
what I think we were very intent on trying to do when we were doing
and make up.
We were always trying to make it up, and I think that will give us that freedom to go.
Yep.
We don't need to make it up.
Yep.
We can actually just really, really enjoy the parts that we want to.
Yeah.
And like really slow down.
Yeah.
Because I think we don't allow ourselves to do that, and I reckon that will give us the freedom And along with that, whenever there was a note that I heard that was like that the person wanted to bring out, that they arrive early on it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of, it goes together, that in a way you can arrive much earlier than you think. So if you've got an accent or something, you can put it ahead of the beat, miles, and then that gives you so much more time on that as a result, because you've got there early. And that I noticed that, like I actually played along with the Farrenc, because I just love that piece, and it was like, whoa, okay, you're over there. Oh no, you're back here. No, you're over there. And that's what you've been doing with all the emotion. You can hardly keep up, because I think our brains have that music so ingrained in our heads. In tempo. Our brains are not quick to come up with that variety. So I guess that would be our challenge, to keep challenging each other to do that. But it's going to have fun effect on you. And it did when we did the Brahms as well, because we ended up, and sometimes we might just have to put down a take that works. You know.
One thing that I've noticed, I think I wrote to you guys, was that with hairpins, depending on the size of them, or the length of them, I mean, the smaller ones tend to be more localized, agogic, you know, at the apex, with something expressive there, be it vibrato, portamento, or in my case, you know, asynchrony. But for larger ones, what I noticed on some of the recordings, particularly Saint-Saëns piano playing, is that often the hairpin, the start of the hairpin signifies slow down immediately, like it's just a slower tempo suddenly.
So not getting faster to the top.
No, it's like, so we can, you know, I think particularly in the Saint-Saëns, we can think, is that appropriate at this moment? And I think I think these things always mean do something.
Just one more thing about vibrato.
Oh yes.
I've observed that it's generally a narrow amplitude, but I think that it's actually a slightly slower frequency than the German style that I've heard. So it's generally a bit more relaxed, apart from in moments of extreme harmonic tension. So that's something we could aim to mix the vibrato up and to keep it a little bit slower than we've been used to.
But still a narrow amplitude.
Still a narrow amplitude.
Yeah.
I think it's really rare.
That's the
Let's try a portamento. Well, for us three anyway.
From the
Let's try a. Definitely there. Yeah. And can we try doing one between bar 1 and 2?
The C to the E.
And I think actually a German style one works there. So moving on the old finger first. And then I'd be interested to hear how a bit of Inegal on the third bar sound. So maybe if we just linger a tiny bit on the first note. And then quite a lot of time between bar 4 and 5.
It's more nagogic, isn't it?
It's nagogic, sorry, yeah.
No, just to be clear, because it's not just da da dee da dee da, but da da dee da dee da.
It's just try.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that we'd have to agree on, because it's
26 as well.
We sort of did that.
We did that anyway.
We did it. We did do it.
I think a lot of these things we did. Yeah. And then long time before we played bar 5. Would be nice, I think.
Okay.
These are just ideas looking on the score, so they may or may not work.
And then to the G sharp.
Lots of vib on bar 11. We got Fort Sandy there. Yeah. And then slow a relaxation time-wise into the next bar. Yeah. And then I've got an acceleration mark through bars 22 and 23. Neil, you should say if any of these are make your life.
No, it doesn't. But it could be gradually from 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'd put it.